We're going to be covering performance reviews, and I don't want to hesitate on getting into the system here. So let's go ahead and just share my browser, and we'll talk about performance reviews and how they're set up. I do want to remind you that we do have the chat as well as the Q&A open. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use that to ask those questions, and we'll try to answer them during the training today. But if there are questions that are outstanding, we'll follow up with you and make sure that you get those answered. So let's go ahead and look at performance reviews. Of course, this is something that is performed when the person's actually doing the performance review right here in self-service. I'm not going to go and do it right now, but this is where it would be done. But let's talk about how this is set up, and so you can see how that all works, and then we'll look at an actual performance review taking place. So of course, what we're going to do is go into admin. I'm going into HR. You could go to payroll or recruiting. As long as we can get to the settings, this is where we're going to do the configuration of our performance reviews. Now, these are kind of spread out over a few different places. They're under learning management, they're under performance reviews, and of course, there's an approval workflow as well. And that also might require an employee group or groups to be configured. So there's quite a bit of configuration that goes into configuring performance reviews. All right, so let's actually start with the workflow because you need this to do a performance review. And I have a few different workflows configured here for performance review. I'm just going to go ahead and pick one of them just so you can kind of see how these are going to be set up here. And so you could see, of course, you give it a name, make it make it a descriptive of what this is. If you are going to have a few of them, you may want to do like I've done here, where you put in the department or maybe the job title or something that would make it unique from other performance review workflows. Of course, the workflow type is going to be performance review. And this is only available in self-service because that is where it's performed. And here is the group or groups that this would apply to. So these would actually be set up, and you may already have groups configured in your system. They're going to be set up right here. I've chosen the group that I call accounting department group. I could have multiple groups in here if I needed to have this for facilities and finance as well, or something. I can do something like that if I wanted to. All right. I may want to put notes on here, give it a little description of what this is about. Of course, it needs to be active to be used, so you'll want to make sure that is checked when you're wanting to use this here. I have this confirmation text, but you don't need this. What this will do is when I submit the review, it's going to show this confirmation text. You do not need to have that there. You could have this blank, but if you want their signature, you do need to have this right here. All right, multiple approvals. So if I needed multiple people to approve it within a group, I could do that right there. I'm not setting that up. And I'm not doing any auto actions because I want somebody to actually approve it. Whoever it was sent to, I want them to approve that. I don't want to escalate it or approve or reject it automatically. So of course, the initiator is always going to be here as the first line item. You can't remove it or move it. This is the person who's actually doing the review and going to click submit. And then you may have one or more people who are going to be involved in the approval process. I've selected a specific employee, but just to show you that, who is the performer? Is it the employee who is assigned to that review? Is it a specific employee like I've done where I go and I search for the employee or employees? Is it a group? Does it go back to the initiator? Is it an org type like the manager, supervisor, whatever your org structure is called? Is there a certain position? Maybe the HR manager and whoever's in that position would do it. And of course, we have precision workflows as well. It could be one of these. So however you may have that configured there. Now, if I do select an employee, of course, I can select one or more employees in here if I wanted to do that. Very simple to do that. All right, and I might have other steps here. So verify or notification. Verify would go before the approval, so it allows you to do multiple people reviewing it before it gets approved. Notification could be before or after approval. You want to notify one or more people that this has been submitted or it's been approved. And escalation says after waiting a certain amount of time, sorry, let me add that back in there. After waiting a certain amount of time, you want to escalate it to somebody else. So maybe the approver is just too busy and they can't get to it within a certain amount of time, you can escalate it to somebody else. All right, so you'll need to set up, like I said, at least one of these. I have several set up, but I'll just remember this one right here to set that up. Now, when we're talking about performance, we do have part of it here in learning management. These are going to be the competencies that might go on a performance review. All right, so they do need to be set here, and then we add them into the reviews right here. So you'll see some examples I have set up now. It does require a group. So this will be something that's in the code tables. If you've never seen the code tables, I'll go there right now. But you can go to your code tables right there. You can also get to that by clicking into, like when you add, you'll see this little gear. This will take you to those groups. If you don't have it set up or you want to add a new one, you don't need to go to the code table to do it. You can do it right from this little blue gear. And you may see this throughout the system, not necessarily just in performance reviews. Maybe you're looking at departments and there's a new department. You can actually do that, let's say from the position screen, and add a department there. And so here you'll see an example of my different competency groups. If I want to go to the code table, I can click on open in settings. Of course, I can go down to code tables and go to competency groups. So whatever way you want to do that there, but you'll set up the various groups. Like I have several groups out here and of course, several competencies that I've created in the system here. All right, so very simple. I would select the group that it's going to be for. Let's just say safety. And then I'm going to type in the name and the description of this. So whatever this happens to be, let me click on one where I have an example here. I said new hire one. Let me choose future development. So future development is the group. The name of this competency is future development, and then a description for what that means. I can copy and paste from, let's say a document in here if I wanted to. Of course, I could just type in whatever I like, and you certainly could type in quite a bit of characters here. As you can see, there's a big, huge box, a memo field where I can type in a very long description if I need to do that. All right, now let's just talk real quick about the delete button here. This is only able to be deleted if it has not been used. So if you type one in and you created it and you've used it in some previous reviews, you will not be able to delete it. So if I click this and it's been used, it'll tell me that it's been used like that. All right, so it has been used by review competencies. I would need to go first over there and remove it first. If I create one and then I decide I don't want it, I can, delete it before I've added it to my competencies. And of course, if I make any changes, I would hit save. If I just open this on whatever I want to just cancel out. All right, so here you can set up as many as you want. As you can see, I have dozens of them set up in my system here. And you can set up whatever you like as far as your competencies. All right, so that was under learning management is your competencies. All right, once you have those configured, in order to use them on a performance review, you need to add them here. All right, so you'll see I have probably all, if not all of them, then most of them over here. And I could create those over here. So I'll just click the add button. And this is where I can add those in if I need to. Let me click on one where I have that. So here's my new hire one. There's the name of it. This is the drop-down menu. So I'm selecting the group new hire. And here's the list of those competencies that would have been created over there. All right, so that's where that comes from. You'll see the description populated from that one there. And then here's a review scale. So this allows you to set a review scale for this particular competency. And you might say, oh, this is a scale of 1 to 5. I'll talk about those in a second, but here's where you can create those scales. Now, you don't have to have a review scale. If you want to have one where maybe you just type in notes on it or something, you can not have a review scale if you would like. All right, so here's where you would just add all those in. And any ones you want to use on the reviews, you would need to add them in here before you can move on to the other ones. Let's look at review scales real quick, because this is where you would create those review scales. You might use in competencies, you might use them in goals, and so forth. So you need to have at least one here if you're going to be using the system for performance reviews, and they have scoring on them, because how are you going to score it if you don't have a review scale? So here you'll see I've got several of them set up. I'll just click on one of them so you get an idea of what this is looking like. Now, the name, I always recommend make it a unique name that describes what this is. So this is my scale from 1 to 5. Right? The rating limit is 5. And then here are the various ratings that I've given it. And so I've got 1 is strongly disagree, 5 is strongly agree. You'll see it very simple. I just typed in the rating. What is the name of that rating? And if I like a description of it, I can do that. Let me show you one where I have a description. So if I go to this one, I have descriptions. So you get an idea what it could look like. This is not a requirement. You don't have to put a description there, but I can. And you'll see here, if I ever do a 0, I can say whether or not I want to include this in the total score. So it's possible that a 0 is more like a NA or not applicable because they, maybe they're too new to be judged on something, and so you might say yes, 0 is okay for them to say not applicable, or maybe the rating literally says NA, and you don't want to include that in the score, so it'll just ignore that one and score all the others, of course. Now this isn't here for anything that's not 0. All right, so let me go ahead and close this up. And as I mentioned, you can have as many as you like. I've got about 15 of them in here, so you can put those in there. Now, before I get over to my templates, there's one other thing that you may want to have on your performance reviews, and that is company goals. All right, so I have some examples of company goals. Now, this does not necessarily mean that everybody in the company shares these goals. You might think of this as maybe departmental goals, OKRs, those types of things. It's just not something that is not unique to the employee. So they may be a member of a department, and all members of the department are working on this particular goal. They're all contributing. So you'll see here, like financial accuracy, focus on achieving a high degree of accuracy. So I've got this description here. I might assign this to my accounting group, and they all contribute to this. And maybe I've got others for other groups. Now I might have an overall company one, like, hey, the company needs to, I don't know, work on attendance. And so everybody within the company has that assigned to every single review because we all need to work on the attendance. So that would be an example there. But if it is for a department or a job title, it might be something specific to that job title. The customer support team needs to get our customer satisfaction above 90%. So they're all contributing to that. All right, so just different goal examples here. Now, these do have a status here of active or inactive, and of course, I may have some that are inactive. So if I want to see those, I can toggle that right there. All right, so we've talked about goals, scales, and review competencies. I should say company goals, scales, and review competencies. Let's look at review templates. This is where you set up the actual template that can be used in one or more review periods, is the terminology we use. So what we'll do here is I will look at one. I've got, let's just say this annual review. All right, so again, give it a name that's going to help you identify what it is. If I simply just call it review, and I've got 14 different ones of them called review, I might not know which one's which. So if this is going to be the review template for the accounting department, I might want to say accounting department reviews or annual review accounting or something like that. All right, of course, you can have a nice long description here if you need to. Now, this is the scale that will help determine when they get the overall calculation of the review. It'll have a description of their score. And this is the scale that it will use to provide that description. So this is going to refer back to those rating scales. And maybe I have, I don't know, 0 to 100 or something like that, or 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. Each one of those steps might have a nice description on it. When we get the overall calculation of the performance review, it'll compare to this, find the area that it matches. Let's say it's 85%. What is 85% in this review scale? And it will use that description. And it'll say, above average or something like that. Of course, it does need to be active to be used. So this will be checked for any ones that you're going to use. If you're, of course, not going to use it, then it doesn't need to be active. Maybe you're not ready to use it. You're still working on it when other people are in here or something. So that is, necessary to use this one. It needs to be active. Now, a recruiting template. You'll notice when I check that off, it removes some of those things here. This is something that you can use in recruiting when they're doing an interview for a candidate. So if you would like to have various questions that you're going to provide to the managers or whoever's doing your interviews, you can set up your competencies with interview questions. Perhaps you even have a competency group called interview questions, And then you could create a template of all of those questions you want them to ask, and they can give ratings on them. So you can use it for a recruiting template. A recruiting template is not used for an employee because they're already an employee. They're not being recruited unless they happen to be applying for a job, in which case that a recruiting template could be used for that employee, but it's definitely not used in self-service in the performance reviews. All right, allow manual competency ratings and allow manual goal ratings. These are very similar because these are different things here. So when I'm doing my ratings for competencies or goals, I can do it manually rather than selecting from a dropdown. So I might type in a number. Okay, so that's what it would allow me to do that. If I have them unchecked, it's going to be a drop-down menu of the scale that's selected for the goals as well as the competencies. All right, here I might want to hide the competency rating as I'm going through the scoring. I may not want that showing at the bottom of the review because I don't want them to, focus heavily on like the percentage. And if they're just at like 89.85%, go back and reevaluate something to make it 90% because that means something, in their mind. So you might want to hide that. And then same thing with the overall rating. Maybe you want to hide that. Now, it doesn't mean hide it permanently. It means hide it when they're doing their performance review. Okay, and then use hide settings in HR admin. So when an HR admin is looking at it, you can say, if you check this, it will respect these here. If you don't, you'll be able to see the scores, the ratings and the overall score. All right, and then here we have the balancing of the scores between competencies, personal goals, and company goals. So you can figure out whatever you want to do here. It does need to equal to 100%. So I've got it 60, 20, 20. You could do 100% competencies, still have goals on there for personal or company goals, but they don't affect the overall score. You could try to make it very even, like 34, 33, 33 or something. So whatever makes the most sense to you. All right, for those goals, what is the scale you're going to use? So again, you set up the scales. You possibly could have a different scale for goals than you have for different competencies. All right, and then finally, these are all the competencies that I've added to this performance review. Very easy to do that. You'll see here, I just click the add button and I select the competencies that I've created and add it into the particular performance review. So maybe I need these guest services ones, might do something like that. And it's going to add those onto my performance reviews. In fact, you'll see down here, it added these three. If I want to remove them, simple trash can them. Okay. It will group them up by those different competency groups. All right. And then after you've added your competencies, you do need to put the weight in here. You can't save if the weight of this doesn't equal 100%. So very similar to the weighting for the goals and competencies, this is within the competencies. You might say one or more of these as a higher weight than the others so that the calculation for the overall competency score is affected differently. So as you'll see here, I said technical skills is 10%, listening only, or sorry, 20%, listening is only 10, analysis and reasoning is 15, et cetera. Now, of course, these could all be even. I don't know how many, I think I have 7 groups, so I'd have to put it in there at 20 something percent each, or not 20, but like 12% each or something like that to get it correct. It'll show you here, if I only type in like 2, it'll say, oh, it's only 82. It needs to be 100. I cannot save until it equals 100. So I'd have to come back in and make sure that it's right. All right. Now, once you have all that set up, of course, I would save this. Now, I do want to show this clone button. Once you've created one, if you would like to use that as a template for others, very simple to clone it. And then you can go into that clone and maybe you change something in there, like maybe the balance changes or some different technical skills are added or whatever competencies might change. But overall, maybe you've got like a standard where the same 10 competencies are there, and then each department has its own set of competencies that you want to add in there. You may make one here called like template, and then you just clone it, all those different times. You can do that from right here, or I can check it off right here and clone, whichever way I'd like to do that. All right, let's look at review periods, which is where you actually pick the template and you start assigning it to the employees and things like that. I'm going to go to this annual review right here. All right, so the period name, again, I like to make it unique. This is my annual review. I might want to call this annual review dash department or something so I know which one this is for. Again, you can do that there. Here's the template. Now, so this is why I'm saying the template needs to be set up first. So you can see the different templates are available there. All right, visualizing the ratings. So when I'm looking at the ratings after the performance review is done, it can show no visualization. It would just show like 4 out of 5. You can have a progress bar. So if it was 4 out of 5, it would be filled up about 80, filled up 80% of the way. Or it can show stars. So 4 out of 5 would show 4 stars with 1 star blank. Total of 5 stars. If I had 3 stars, it would be like, 2 and 1 blank or something like that. So you can get your choices there and make it, show the way you like. And this is for the overall review. I can't say I want stars for the first part and then performance, the progress bar for the bottom. I can't mix and match those. Of course, as I mentioned, it needs to be active in order for us to use this. Now, I will point out this one right here, 360-degree review. That enables other things under the type. I believe I have one. Let me just check. This one is set as 360. I'll stay in this one here. So this one enables me to select other people like peers and direct reports. Now you'll notice here, I don't need to select them, but I can select them, in the future if I want to add in those types of things in there. So I personally, I always set 360. I think that other one somebody set up for me, but I always set that so I have the option of later going back and changing it, because you'll see once I've saved, I cannot change this. So go ahead and do that as it were for you, whatever makes most sense. Now, aggregate reviews. So if you have more than one person in this type here, and we'll talk about that in a moment, this says to put all the reviews together to get an overall score, if you like, of those. Otherwise, they would be treated like they're separate reviews, like I did my review, and here it is. I could see it. And then my manager did the review of me, and it's a separate review. And so they're like separate reports. If I want them together, that's the aggregated view. They would be combined together. All right, if I do check this off, I can show the aggregated overall score. It would take my score of, maybe I'd set 100% for me, and my manager says, no, it's really like 70%. Come on. And it would show an overall score of 85. So you can have that on there if you want and show the overall aggregated score. You don't have to do that, but it's an option there. All right, future goals. So on the performance review, if you want to show goals for the next review cycle, you can add that right there. Check that box off. It shows that. And then this control task sequence, this is again one of those settings that you have to set it when you create it, but that allows you to say which order this must go. In other words, you might want to say the employee, the self does it first, and then the manager. And the manager can see what the employee has answered. So that would allow you to do that there. If you have peers and the direct reports, you might want to say the peers go, and then the employee, and then the manager, and then whatever it is. So you can put them in the order that you like. Okay. Speaking of the type here, so self is the employee who is being reviewed. They don't have to be included. It could just be the manager or peers or things like that. Peers would be people you select, but we also have the option when you're doing peers to include things like a project manager. Maybe they worked on a project for 6 months and you want that manager to give them a review. You'll see it enables this right here, project organization. Right? Direct reports means I'm going to review my manager, and manager means my manager is going to review me. So you can mix and match those as appropriate. Here is that workflow. So the workflow that I set up in the beginning, it's right there. Now, because I selected manager, I have this org chart option. This is defining this word manager based off of the org chart, the org structure you have in there. So if I've got 3, like I do here, supervisor, comp manager, and manager, who is considered to be manager? And the same thing would happen with peers. I don't have to, but I could say, oh, the project supervisor is the peer that I want to be able to add in there. And I can even set the criteria of like, hey, they need to work so many hours here. Because if they just work there for 5 minutes, the project manager may not even know who they are. They did some work there, but they don't remember who they are. And so let's not include them. But you might want to include them, if they work there for, several months, 6 months, something like that. All right, and then we have the anonymous type here and the anonymous level. So here, if I want to make certain things anonymous, like maybe I don't want the peers' names to be on the review, I can set that, or the direct reports. If I'm reviewing my manager, maybe I don't want my name to appear on that review. So you can set that if you like to. You don't have to set anything as far as the anonymous type or the anonymous level. Anonymous level would mean these people can see who the anonymous people are. Okay. And then we finally have the frequency here. So mine is a recurring one. When it's recurring, I say how often it recurs, in which case 12 months, so every year. And we're going to start it based off of the hire date. Now, this could be a date. So I could say it starts on 1/1/26. And then what that would mean is going to go from 1/1/26 to 12/31/26. And then the review date, the date I actually perform the review, would be like 1/1/27, and then maybe you go, 30 days forward or something like that. So you can use tokens like I've done here. You don't have to come in every year and reset this. Once I set it for January to December, it's going to keep rolling every year. I don't have to come in and say, 27 and 28 and 29, et cetera, into the future. If it's not here, if it's a custom one, maybe it's like a one-time new hire review. I might say, this is the new hire date and new hire date plus 30 or something, because just one time. It's not going to repeat every 30 days. I'm just doing it once. All right, now once I create this, I then get these options up here. So the first time you come in here, these don't exist. But once I've done it, then that exists. And this is where I assign the employees who are going to be taking this review. So I've already got a bunch of employees in here, but here's where I add this. So adding everybody who's eligible to take this based off of that workflow is going to get added to this. I can add individuals if I want to. So maybe I just want to add Damien. If I have a group of employees outside of the group from the workflow, there might be groups, subgroups basically of that. I might want to do that by group. Okay. I only see active reviews here. And then you'll see here different things for publishing. Let me go back to this because I talked about that. Here is auto publish. So if you have this enabled, saying auto publish the self reviewer and manager, these are the people it's going to publish to, you don't need to worry about publishing over here unless you've never published before. But this will say once everything is approved, automatically publish it to self-service. This will be the manual publishing of that. So when I choose publish here, any of them that are completed, I can choose where do I want to publish it to. The employee, the reviewer, their manager. Now the manager may not be the reviewer. So that's why that's there. And so I can say, publish it all, and now it's going to be viewable to that person, the completed review, viewable to that person. Now, once I have people in here, you'll see how I have the same people several times because every year it's doing it. Automatically, it's going on to the next one. And I can see their status of these things. I can click in here to see if there's multiple people, what is the status of those people? So it filled in the start and end date of this, the review dates of that, and then who's actually performing it and where they are in this. And of course, I could remove them. I could stop reviewing maybe temporarily if I want to do that. Talk about these real quick here. Personal goals. So this is if I want like the HR person to add goals, whether it's manually by clicking add or importing it from a template. So I've got several goals here. Now these could have been set by the employee in self-service, by their manager in the past reviews and the future goals. So they could come from a lot of places. But if I want to add one as an HR person, I can come in here and say I want to add one to Kayvon here and hit the review. The goal is going to be learn Excel. All right, and this is the review it's for, of course. The due date if I want to set it, the weight of this. So if he has several, I might want to put in this is 50% or 20% or something. All right, the description of this, take Excel training like that. And then what workflow will be used for the approval of this goal? They haven't completed it. Now, maybe they did. You want to just put it in here. But if they haven't, I could just do it like that. Now, this is something like I mentioned, the employee could do this if you allow them to do it in self-service. You can do it in admin. You can have the manager do it if they get allowed to do it in self-service, and it can be done on a performance review. So lots of options out there. As you can see, I have several. All right, these would be any future goals, again, that maybe HR wants to add manually. Not the manager, but HR is going to add them, and you'll see the period that is for. Okay, and then These would be the company goals that are going to be used. So I've got 2 of them. They weight 50% each. Okay, all that being said, I apologize for being over by a couple of minutes, but I want to just go through the actual performing of the review. So what would happen is when it's time to do the review, assuming you have the notifications turned on and we have a whole training on notifications, it's going to send a notification to the employees who need to do that review. So if it's me and it's my manager, we would both get notifications saying it's time to do, Steve's review or Gary's review or whoever's review. So I'd have a notification over here, email, if I've opted into text messaging, if I'm using the mobile, it's going to give me those notifications. You'll see it here as a task like this. All right. And then of course, then you can click on it to open it up. Let me find one. I'm going to open one where I have goals so you can see what that looks like. So this one, I'm the manager of Brenda. This is the period that is covering. Here's the review period. So I need to do it sometime between June of last year and June of this year. And then here are the goals that were assigned to her, whether that was in the review periods, on the employee record, the employee added it, the manager added it. These are those goals. So these would have been typed in. And here you can see what is the goal, just a brief headline of it. And there's the description. And here's the scoring in case I don't know what 1, 2, and 3 might mean. And now I can select the right scoring, put the date that it was completed. Now the employee could have done this. If they're doing their own review, they might have filled these things in. This could have been done ahead of time before the review even happened. And you have quarterly goals. They do it each quarter. And then when you do the review in January, they're already populated. All right, here you see the company goals. So again, whatever those company goals are, keeps Hardee's less than 2%, exceeded it, didn't make it, whatever that is, notes if I want to do that, the date that they reached that goal, whatever that is. And then here are the competencies. I won't go through all of them because it's kind of the same thing over and over again. But what is the headline of that? What is the description and the scoring? So the performer would just go through, they would answer all of these things, go through and select whatever it is. Perhaps they type in notes about each particular competency. If I have the future goals enabled and I'm the manager, I can set goals for next year. Very similar to like I just did it on the review, but this is for next review cycle, right? So I have some of this information here, not everything that's available for the other one, because it knows what the next review is. It's just the same review next year. All right. And then here you'll see the scores. If I have them enabled, which I do, I can see them right here. If I didn't, this would be blank. There wouldn't be anything here. And I have the overall scores and everything shown, so I can see this. Now, this could all be turned off if I want to do that. But I can see my scores for the competencies. This is the calculated based off of the weight. The review, the goal scores, the company score. And then this, again, is based off of the weight of these. And I don't remember what it is, but there's my score. And there's the description that meets 89.927%, is exceptional. All right. And that's a performance review. Doing that, of course, went pretty quickly through here, but the nice thing about it is very similar as you move down from goals to competencies. The scoring is very straightforward. I think very easy to use there. And when this is done, that's where you may have it auto-publish. So if there's 2 sides of the story, it won't auto-publish right away. But once both sides are submitted and approved, it'll auto-publish, and that will then be available for the employee to see over here in their reviews, assuming you publish it to the employee, or the manager to see, assuming you publish it to the manager. I'm going to show you what that looks like here. What review period am I going to look at? Let's go to this one, and I can review that one here and see what my score was. Now I have that aggregated review with the bar, so this is what it shows. I can see both people who did the review. There's the rating, 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5, etc. Each way going down. If I had comments, I'd be able to see them there. Okay, of course, I can download a copy of this. If I want it like in a PDF or something, I can do that. Here you can see my goals, and there's the company goals. And like I said, I can download that. All right, so I appreciate people who stuck around till the end. I do want to cover what's coming up here. And let's just see. Let's go forward here. So here's our upcoming schedule of events. We have Affordable Care Act reporting in 2 weeks. That's due a little bit later, so we're able to push it into February there. We'll cover Affordable Care Act reporting for those folks who are in the United States and need to do Affordable Care Act reporting. We're going to touch on some payroll things here. So first off, GL account mapping. We haven't talked about this in a while. There's been some enhancements since the last time we talked about it. So we're going to talk about how that works. If you're ever curious about how the GL is set up in the system, how it maps over so that you can transfer the GL, let's say, over to Intact, or you export the file out or something like that, or have a report. All right, then we're going to jump into learning management, which is a lot of things there. Again, we've had some enhancements here, so we're going to talk about those things. Since the last time we talked, we've had a number of enhancements, so we'll talk about that in March. And then we'll talk about how do you actually process payroll? What are the steps involved there? What reports can you run? How do you process payroll? All right, so I do want to thank everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the extra few minutes you gave us. Again, if you do have questions, you can reach out to us through the system. You can hit the help menu, click on the help email or phone number. You can submit a ticket. And if you do work with a partner, of course, you can reach out to your partner. But thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you next time.